Hi everyone, the Partial Prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so for today's update, we're going to cover stuff from January 18th to February 28th and finish out the month of February. Because we are now in the month of March, and there has been so much going on. And so there's no way we could cover everything. And so I pick what I consider to be kind of the most prophetical things to put in my prophecy update. There's stuff that's always ongoing, like the mass shooting things, the weather stuff, and so I tend not to cover those. Even though they're definitely signs of the last days, okay? Jesus said things would be pretty bad in the last days, and they are. Brother will rise up against brother in the last days. And so we definitely see a lot of hate in the last days. Love will grow cold in the last days, is what Jesus said. And so we're definitely seeing that in this time that we're living in right now. So I don't cover those unless there's something really prophetical that stands out. Anyways, but I especially like to cover things that are really signs that Jesus is coming soon. So let's get started because there's so much to cover. Okay, so first I wanted to read this article about why the Trump administration is holding millions of dollars from Venezuela oil sales in a Qatari bank. Okay, that's a very good question. And so the first sale of the Venezuela, so remember that Trump on January 3rd got Maduro. They captured him, and so he's no longer in Venezuela. And then the United States has also been seizing the tankers, the oil tankers, and so apparently and selling the oil. Okay, so this says hundreds of millions of dollars that the United States is raising from the sale of Venezuela oil is being sequestered in Qatar. It's an indirect path that could speed the flow of a much needed money to Venezuela, but it also raises questions about the transparency surrounding those funds. The Trump administration confirmed the first sale of Venezuelan oil Wednesday. I think that was January 14th, saying it raised $500 million. It is just the first of numerous sales expected to bring in billions of dollars in the months and potentially years to come. The funds were sent to Qatar rather than being held in U.S. banks. So it's interesting because Trump talks about having an America First kind of belief system, but then he does weird things like this, putting money in a Qatari bank. Because obviously it would be helpful for our economy to have that money in our banks. So I guess the 7th tanker was seized on January 20th, and I sort of kind of haven't been keeping track since then to know if there's been more tankers seized since then. But they talked about, so it's talked about that the money is going to help Venezuela rebuild. But it's kind of interesting to see what Trump would be doing with the money and maybe taking advantage of the interest from the money. So just really definitely very interesting. Okay, so then what happened in January was okay, so these are the text exchanges that were released that had to do with, okay, so remember how Trump wanted Greenland, okay? And he was so gun-ho and so whatever obsessed about getting Greenland, okay? So then the BBC released some of the texts that were exchanged between different leaders. so that we could help understand their thinking. So this text was between Trump and the Norwegian Prime Minister. His name is Jonas Støre. Okay, so this happened on January 18th. Okay. Okay, so dear Mr. President, dear Donald, on the contact across the Atlantic on Greenland, Gaza, Ukraine, and your tariff announcement yesterday. You know our position on these issues, but we believe we should all work to take this down and de-escalate. So much is happening around us where we need to stand together. We are proposing a call with you later, with both of us or separately. Give us a hint of what you prefer best. And then it's Alex on behalf of the Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb, and then Jonas. Okay. So they were trying to get Trump to de-escalate with Greenland. Because, I mean, Trump was really kind of making enemies of our allies by trying to get Greenland. So that was one text. Okay, so then here's Trump's response. That was on January 18th. So you kind of get a little insight into his mind. He says, Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America. Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. But we had boats landing there also. I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding, and now NATO should do some for the United States. The world is not secure unless we have complete and total control of Greenland. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump. Definitely, I highlighted the part where he says, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace. So he's delusional, obviously. And like the part about where he thinks he stopped 8 wars, because I think I talked about this, I think, in my last video, but one of the wars, I believe, was the Afghanistan, Pakistan, and they're back at it again. So I don't think that's really accurate. And I think Trump prides himself as being kind of a president of peace, like kind of trying to steal Jesus's title of being a prince of peace, but really his flesh gets in the way. And so that's what we're seeing with this Greenland thing. And then here's what French President Emmanuel Macron wrote on January 19th. It said, from President Macron to President Trump, my friend, we are totally in line on Syria. We can do great things on Iran. I do not understand what you are doing on Greenland. Let us try to build great things. One, I can set up a G7 meeting after Davos in Paris on Thursday afternoon. I can invite the Ukrainians, the Danish, the Syrians, and the Russians in the margins. 2, let us have a dinner together in Paris together on Thursday before you go back to the U.S. Emmanuel. So a lot of the other leaders are trying to appease Trump, calm him down. So this was kind of a sandwich, sort of like Macron kind of talks about good things and then puts the bad thing in the middle. Okay, so then we had the message from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte to Trump. Okay, that's from January 20th. He said, Mr. President, dear Donald, what you accomplished in Syria today is incredible. I will use my media engagements in Davos to highlight your work there, in Gaza, and in Ukraine. I am committed to finding a way forward on Greenland. Can't wait to see you. Yours, Mark. So obviously we see that there's some leaders that kind of not kind of, but like totally kowtowed Trump. I don't know if I'm using that word right, but that are totally on Trump's side. Okay. And so this guy said he would even help him figure out Greenland for Trump. And so I put in some of the dates. So what did Trump accomplish in Syria, and how incredible is it really? Okay, on January 18th, there was a 14-point, so all these ceasefire that the Trump administration does always have so many points in them. Okay, so a 14-point ceasefire agreement between Syria and Kurdish-led SDF negotiated through U.S. envoy Tom Barak. On January 19th, Trump had a phone call with the Syrian president. And then on January 20th, Trump had his speech at Davos where he was touting all of his accomplishments, quote unquote. I put in quotes. So actually, this ceasefire agreement between Syria and the Kurdish-led SDF, the Kurds really got thrown under the bus, and by Trump, basically the Trump administration. And it actually started in Trump's first term. Trump allowed Turkey to come into Syria, and Turkey was bombing the Kurds and killed a bunch of Kurds. So that was the first time that Trump threw the Kurds under the bus. But now with this ceasefire agreement, he's basically forcing the Kurds to align with the Syrian government. And like a lot of people are like, why is Trump makes nice with this Syrian president, but he is a terrorist in disguise. Okay, just because he's got a suit on doesn't mean he changed his terrorism ways. Okay. So definitely some other bad behavior from Trump. So that's up to January 20th. So backing up to these are this. So Trump posted this on Truth Social on January 19th. Okay, this map. See, he put the United States flag all up through Canada, and I think Greenland's on that picture too. And so he definitely wants to be in charge of everything. Okay. So we posted that. What was interesting about January 19th was, okay, that was when we saw the Northern Lights. And then it's also, January 19th is also the third Christmas, like the latest Christmas. It's celebrated by the Armenians in Jerusalem. Okay. And so I think there's some significance. So there must be some significance that God had the Northern Lights show up on that day. And then that was also Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so, because for each of the Christmases, there's a candle mass that happens exactly 40 days later. Okay. And what I believe is that with the first Christmas, December 25th, we didn't see Jesus show up on Candlemas 40 days later, which was also Groundhog Day, February 2nd. Okay. So then we look to the second Christmas, which was January 7th, and look 40 days later and see if Jesus shows up then. And I don't know if I'd be able to find. Oh yeah, so that would have been February 15th. Well, we didn't see Jesus show up then. So now we're kind of waiting with this third Christmas. It's Candlemas. I don't know if they really actually celebrate Candlemas for this third Christmas. Especially like 40 days later, maybe they do the same Candlemas on February 15th. But the third Candlemas would be the 40th day. Okay, would be February 27th. Okay. So we're definitely seeing a fulfillment of like delay. Moses was delayed on the mountain. Like Moses was supposed to be on the mountain 40 days and he took too long to come down, so they built a golden calf. So we're definitely seeing that happen. So we didn't see Jesus show up February 27th. So delay. One of the golden calves would be like this war in Iran. So people, instead of waiting for the Messiah to come and kind of fix the problems with Iran and other things in the Middle East, everyone turned to Trump and Netanyahu to try to fix these problems. Okay, so that's one golden calf. Anyways, so that's what's going on with that. Okay. Then on January 20th, Trump posted this picture. Oh, and by the way, too, I sometimes highlight. Okay, I don't see anything standing out this day. Oh, well, duh. I kind of missed this. So, January 19th, the reason why I put 4 explanation points is that is a hidden 9/11 number. So, definitely interesting. Then on January 20th, it was at 6 a.m., so I highlighted 6, was when Trump posted this picture of him and, is that J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio? Can't really tell. Posting, planting the American flag in Greenland. So the guy just gets obsessed about things. And apparently, really what happened was in Davos, there was somebody, I don't know if it was the UN guy, I'm not really sure who it was, but there was someone that apparently had a conversation with Trump and explained to Trump that the United States actually has, I think they have a certain amount of land in Greenland where we can put bases, where we're allowed to put military bases. So he probably somehow, whoever this was, he was able to kind of calm Trump down and explain to him that it wasn't as bad as Trump thought it was, and that Trump actually had more power than he thought he did. So good for that guy, because then we haven't heard anything about Greenland since Davos. Okay, so then what else? So then Trump was in Davos, which is the world. Let's see, do I have it written down? I might not have it written down. It's another one of those world meetings where everybody gets together, all the leaders of the world. Okay, and Trump spoke at Davos on January 20th. And like I said, he talked about all his accomplishments, quote unquote, that he's supposedly accomplished. And I guess what was interesting too was that when he did his speech, that was actually 1 year after his inauguration, because it was on January 20th. And then what we saw was that Trump. Oh, okay. So it's the World Economic Forum is what it was. And so then what we saw was on January 22nd. And so everybody has all these kind of meetings and agendas on the sidelines, because since everybody's all together, it's cheaper for people to kind of meet and get their agenda done while they're all in the same country. So then on the 22nd, Trump did his big board of peace, quote unquote, signing in Davos. Okay, and he invited 17 countries to sign with him. Okay. And so I wanted to point out, and so you see a picture of him here holding up the thing that he signed. Okay, and I wanted to point out that Trump plus these 17 countries add up to 18. Okay, which is the 666 of the Antichrist. Okay, which I do believe Trump is the Antichrist. Okay, and so this happened on January 22nd, which that's significant because I think Trump is also the 8th king. He's the 6th king who became the 8th king. Okay. And 22 is the 8th day of the Jewish holidays. Okay. What was interesting too about the Board of Peace signing is it actually happened the 50th week after Trump's Gaza plan, which was on February 4th of last year. Okay. Um, and so that 50 number is interesting because Haman actually makes a gallows that's 50 cubits high. Okay. So this Board of Peace thing I think is very interesting. I think it's very prophetical. I think we see the true nature of Trump with this quote unquote board of peace. Okay. Um so this is another picture of him holds a signing founding charter of the at the Board of Peace meeting Thursday in Davos, Switzerland. So, and you could see on the wall it says Board of Peace, Board of Peace, Board of Peace all over the place. Okay, so then The Hill put out an article that said Trump wants to be king of the world with his Board of Peace stealth attack. Okay. So let me read this to you. And last week, the president made news by announcing the executive committee of his so-called Board of Peace. I put quotes around it. They say so-called. And holding a ceremony to launch the board at the World Economic Conference in Davos, Switzerland. The Board of Peace was originally conceived to enlist international involvement in implementing the U.S. plan to reconstruct Gaza. Members of its executive committee will include billionaire Steve Witkoff and Mark Rowan, Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and U.S. National Security Advisor Robert Gabriel, members of Trump's political inner circle, President of the World Bank Group, A.J. Banga, and a former British Prime Minister, Tony Blair. I didn't count up how many of those people were. That might be an interesting number. But no one should be fooled. The Board of Peace under Trump's chairmanship is a device to enlist others in ratifying his belief that he and only he can run the world. If he has his way, the board will act in ways the United Nations, for 80 years the world's most important international organization, cannot. Okay, so let me count these people while we're thinking about it. Okay, so Steve Witkoff, Mark Rowan, Jared Kushner, Marco Rubio, Robert Gabriel, A.J. Banga, and Tony Blair. So that is 7 people. Okay. And then Trump would make 8. So even though I think the 7 horns, really connects to Biden because he was the 7th king. But this could be another fulfillment of like 7 horns. Okay, and then it says Trump's vision and ambition are clear from the Board of Peace Charter. Its preamble speaks in universal terms. It declares that durable peace requires pragmatic judgment, common sense solutions, like Trump has the common sense solutions, and the courage to depart from approaches and institutions that have too often failed, that only sustained results-oriented partnership grounded in shared burdens and commitments can secure peace in places where it has for too long proven elusive. Whereas the UN endorsed a focus on Gaza, the Board of Peace's new statement. Okay, so remember the UN voted to support Trump's Board of Peace because they thought it was about fixing Gaza. Okay. The Board of Peace's new statement of purpose says nothing about it. Instead, it calls the board an international organization that seeks to promote stability, restore dependable and lawful governance, and secure enduring peace in areas affected or threatened by conflict. Trump's Board of Peace ratifies his desire to run the world in accordance with his own morality and his own mind. Okay, good article. There's more. Among other things, the charter says that Trump himself shall serve as inaugural chairman of the Board of Peace, and he shall separately serve as inaugural representative of the United States of America. So like he's got 2 roles. The chairman shall have exclusive authority to create, modify, or dissolve subsidiary entities as necessary or appropriate to fulfill the Board of Peace's mission. It specifies that decisions of the board shall be made by a majority of the member states present and voting subject to the approval of the chairman. Okay. The world may vote, in other words, but Trump decides. Okay. The chairman gets the final say. Okay. And so I guess this is how you do it. If you can't get the current institutions to give you any power, say you just build your own institutions, and that's really what Trump's doing. Okay, so then it says for a $1 billion contribution, members of the Board of Peace can secure permanent membership as opposed to a 3-year appointment, which requires no contribution. And membership is not exactly voluntary, as French President Emmanuel Macron found out on January 19th when he expressed concerns that the Trump chaired body would have extensive powers beyond transitional governance of the Gaza Strip and would undermine and seek to replace the United Nations framework. In response, Trump threatened a 200% tariff on French wines. Okay, so remember that Trump was using his tariffs as a way to bully people into doing what he wants. So that was really interesting that the Supreme Court had ruled his tariffs unlawful. Okay. And that was on February 20th. Okay, illegal. They said it was illegal. Okay, although Trump's still trying to get around it, and there's still 10% tariffs going on. Anyways, so what's interesting about this is that this is a way for Trump to have power even after his 4-year presidency ends. Okay. So, because ABC News, what did they say? Trump could potentially chair Board of Peace for life. $1 billion contributions are voluntary, U.S. official. The board was originally billed as a council to oversee the rebuilding of Gaza. Chairman for life? Trump, who's expected to chair the board, can potentially hold the position for life, which raises questions about his all-powerful role on the board when a new administration enters office in 2029, when we vote in a new president of the United States. So definitely interesting. So I highlighted here too the caption: President Trump Center sits on stage with international leaders after the signing of a Board of Peace charter during the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, January 22nd, 2026. So yes. I had something to say and I forgot what it was. Okay, so on January 16th was when I guess Trump made an announcement. Let's see. Trump announces Board of Peace. Then on January 2nd was the signing with 17 countries. What was interesting about that too was on January 22nd was when they had that TikTok deal was made to save TikTok for $14 billion. And I kind of talked about how TikTok, I think, might be a prophetic sign of God saying, like, TikTok, you're almost out of time. And so what was interesting, it's interesting that happened the same day as the Board of Peace. So I think it's like God's way of saying that Trump's almost out of time. And maybe showing that God is not happy with this Board of Peace. So definitely interesting. And then we saw in February 19th that there was they actually had the first meeting for the Board of Peace. Okay. And the U.S. So in the trailers on the news, I didn't really kind of look into totally what this means, but the U.S. was going to be paying $10 billion to the Board of Peace. Okay. So I don't know if that's money that's supposed to go toward the rebuilding of Gaza. But it shows you that, Trump's not any different than all the other bad actors that want to use America's money for um their purposes, their own purposes, okay? And I don't think God would really be happy that Trump's trying to take 10 billion from America to rebuild Gaza. I mean, it's just craziness. So so that's that. And then okay, so remember, okay, so I shared this verse back last year on February 4th, when um um Trump made his Gaza announcement on February 4th, okay? Um um about that was when he first talked about his great plan to rebuild Gaza and blah blah blah. And so someone made a video. I mean, I talked about this in previous videos. Someone made a video and so these pictures of Trump Gaza is from that video, and I think they were trying to make a funny video, but Trump actually reposted it. And there's this big giant golden statue of Trump and these little golden statues of Trump in the video. And so what I thought was really fascinating is that this verse in 2 Thessalonians 2:4 that talks about, okay, so it says, okay, now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. Then verse 4 goes on to say, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Okay? So I definitely think Trump is the man of lawlessness. I think he is the son of destruction. Everything he tries to do just causes destruction. So last year on February, when I was talking about February 4th, I highlighted the 2 and the 4 because that matched February 4th. Well, now this year, I highlighted 4 because that matches when Trump signed his Board of Peace on January 22nd, the date was Shabbat 4 on the Hebrew calendar. Okay, so you got that number 4 there. So we see that show up there. So I definitely think we're seeing Trump standing in the holy place, declaring himself, displaying himself as being God. Okay, trying to be in charge of the whole world. Okay. So definitely interesting. Okay. And then what we saw too on January 22nd was Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law and Middle East advisor. Oh, see, I didn't know that Jared Kushner actually had a job, official job, but maybe he's the Middle East advisor. Okay, was roundly mocked this week after he presented his master plan for redeveloping Gaza, which included slides of a futuristic Gaza waterfront complete with 180 towers and a coastal tourism zone. Okay, so I zoom in on the next slide, but I wanted to point out 180 towers, so we see that number 18 kind of hidden in there, which connects the 666. Okay, so definitely very interesting. And then, okay, so here's it zoomed in. And so there's going to be coastal tourism in their plan, a transportation hub, and then energy and digital infrastructure. Okay. And actually someone had made the comment that it kind of looks like, I think, is it from Star Wars? Like some city in Star Wars. Like probably one of the newer Star Wars that I haven't seen. Anyways, but it's got this weird futuristic look to it. And so what was interesting was on January 19th, so the Chabad website, they always have a daily not always, but a lot of times they have a daily thought. And their daily thought on January 19th was about Pharaoh. Okay. Pharaoh of Exodus fame, okay, in the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible. Okay, and so that what they said about Pharaoh is they said Pharaoh is a pain in the neck. He hijacks your mind so your thoughts are devoted to building pointless structures up to the sky. Okay, so I just thought that was so accurate about Trump. Okay, so Trump is kind of like Pharaoh point 2.0 or whatever. I mean, probably not 2.0 because there's probably been a lot of other Pharaoh types since then. But he's probably like the last Pharaoh before Jesus returns. Okay. I didn't get too fancy on this because I was running out of time, but so on January 23rd, the US did another strike on an alleged drug boat. And actually, I sort of have to refresh my mind because, so things, things kind of blow up in the news and then they kind of die down and then you don't really remember what's happening. So, Trump was constantly, okay, so February 3rd, the U.S. shoots down. Oh, no, that's not it. Sorry, I was thinking that was something else. Okay, never mind. But remember that the U.S. was shooting down they were bombing these alleged drug boats. And I think it's very iffy. Well, I don't think it's just iffy behavior. I think it's bad behavior. And because America's playing judge, jury, and executioner without, I mean, who knows really who's in these boats? They claim that they know that they're drug people, but do they really know for sure? So on January 23rd, two people were killed. Okay, and so on January 23rd, the total was 36 total boats and 117 people killed. And once again, it's another piece of information that I haven't kept up on because I believe there's been more boats that have been bombed since then. Okay. So that would be helpful to update that information sometime. So things would stop happening and that we need to keep track of. So sometime in the future. Okay. So then this is a map from January 23rd, and it says a map shows where ice and snow are forecast to fall during a winter storm starting on January 23rd, 2026. Okay. So I thought this map was fascinating because it showed you, so it shows how there was going to be snow up above and ice down below. So it was a major winter storm. And actually, this map isn't really showing like what I was hoping it would show because I was really wanting one of those maps where it shows like it'd be like hot in the west and cold in the east or vice versa. Okay, because there's this verse in the Bible, Genesis 8. And so this is during the time of Noah. It says Noah built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. So this was, after Noah got out of the ark, after the flood and everything. What's interesting, the chapter is chapter 8, and then we're moving into verse 22, which I think is a verse that connects to Trump too. Okay, so the chapter 8 connects to Trump, the 8th king, and then 22 connects to Trump, the 8th king. Okay, so it says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, in summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So that's why I wanted one of those, because we've been seeing that this winter. It's been a really weird winter where it'd be like cold in Tennessee and summer like in Colorado. And so it's like the weather is like upside down this winter. And so it's been kind of consistent where it's been a certain way on one side of the country and a different way on the other side of the country. And so anyway, so I thought it was interesting because it says, cold and heat in summer and winter shall not cease. Okay. And so what I think that means is, so I believe Trump is the beast of the earth from Revelation 13. That's the 666 guy. Okay. And while he's still around, we're going to see, this is the judgment of God, where we're going to see things like cold and heat and summer and winter happening all at the same time. Okay. Because of God's judgment. Okay. And so we've definitely seen a lot of judgment in these winter storms this winter, or lack of winter storms. Because, like, for example, in Colorado, if they haven't gotten moisture in Colorado, or like, so like Colorado and Kansas and like Missouri, let me think. Like, kind of the plains there, they haven't gotten some good moisture. And so then we've been getting these storms where the wind kicks up and starts these fires, okay, because everything's so dry. And so we have parts of the country that get these unbelievable amounts of snow, and then there's other parts of the country that are staying in like a drought pattern. Okay. I mean, really, like the past week, it's been like kind of like droughts in the middle, and then there's been major snowstorm in California. And I'll show you, I have slides for this. Major snowstorms in California. The Colorado mountains got snow too, but not on the plains in Colorado. And then there's been major storms in the Northeast. So definitely an interesting pattern picture there. Because remember I said that like Jesus is always in the middle. So it's kind of interesting that we have this picture of dryness in the middle and then freezing, massive amounts of snow on the east and on the west. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. So then in January, what was going on too? So we had the Renee Good shooting on January 7th. There was a second guy who was shot on January 14th, but he was only injured. So we never really heard much about that. January 24th was the third shooting, the second death, Alex Preddy. What's interesting, he was also a 37-year-old. And what I think is interesting too is that Renee Good and Alex Preddy, like, to me, their names are interesting. It's like you want to feel good about them because they have such nice names. Okay. But it actually came out about Alex Preddy, that he had been harassing ICE, like, I guess, earlier. But I'm not saying that justifies ICE shooting them, because same thing again, I believe that ICE is playing judge, jury, and executioner in their behavior. So I definitely think that's wrong. But we don't want to be deluded to think, okay, ICE is bad and then the people on the left are good. Okay, because that is not an accurate belief. Okay, God talks about the mystery of lawlessness. There's lawless behavior on both sides of the aisle. Okay, on both the left and both the right. Okay. And so we're just kind of seeing them mix it up, and it just is very not unpretty. And then on January 20th, we had the 5-year-old detained. I think it's this one with the blue hat. And then on January 22nd was a 2-year-old. And And so things, it's, so then they were trying to bring down the temperature in Minnesota. They were trying to send some of the ice people home. The last thing that I read was the people in Minnesota weren't really going to believe that ice was going to leave. So they were still kind of protesting in various ways. One of the things, too, that was kind of keeping their protests going is that people on the right would kind of jump in, and the far right would jump in and do some things against the protesters, which would only make them want to protest more. But I had definitely believed that this January 7th was the setup for this civil war that's coming in America, the right versus the left. So what's interesting is, I probably had something else to say, but I forgot. So what's interesting too is that with this 5-year-old, which also he's so cute. What's interesting about him is he's wearing a rabbit hat. Okay. And oh wait, I guess it's okay. I got one more slide before I talk about the rabbit. Okay. So first we want to see that on January 25th, 26th, and 27th, we had post from Bill Clinton, Obama, and Biden. Okay. And so this is what they were saying. Bill Clinton was saying, the actions we take will shape our history. Stand up, speak out. Okay, Obama was on X saying our core values as a nation are under assault. On January 27th, Biden posted pretty much the same thing Bill posted. Stand up and speak out. Okay. I thought what was interesting is Biden's post was on Shvat 9, which is 11/9. Okay, like a hidden 9/11. I think Biden's birthday on the Hebrew calendar is the reverse of that. It's okay. 9/11 on the Hebrew calendar. But so that was fascinating. I mean, it's interesting because these people always kind of repeat things on dates that connect to their numbers. Okay, so Biden posted on January 27th. He's definitely connected to the number 7. Obama posted on January 26th, which 26 is 13 plus 13, and I do believe that Obama's number is 13. I don't know what Bill Clinton's number is. But anyways, so what I connect this, so basically, and we saw this with BLM, is that basically these leaders from the left will encourage the rioters. Okay, because I was in charge. If I was in charge, I would tell these rioters, go home. And the reason why I would say that is because God and Jesus have it covered. Okay, God is going to come and make things right and bring justice to the world. Okay, and so we don't, because I definitely think this is like a false religion where these people believe that they're doing something righteous by protesting. Okay. And God actually says in the prophets, he says, I hate your assemblies. Okay. And so I believe God hates these protests because they're not just quiet, peaceful protests. They always end up becoming, it's not just people standing with the sign or whatever, which, one, I don't have a lot of belief that you could change the world by standing on a corner holding a sign. Unless maybe it says Jesus loves you. But even that's kind of iffy. So what was I saying? Yeah, but like I said, a lot of times the protests turn into rioting, lawlessness, especially after dark. Okay. Anyways, so Revelation 16:12 says, the 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river, the Euphrates, and its water was dried up, so that the way would be prepared for the kings from the east. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet, 3 unclean spirits like frogs. for they are spirits and demons, performing signs, which go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them together for the war of the great day of God the Almighty. Okay, so then verse 15 says, Behold, I am coming like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays awake and keeps his clothes, so that he will not walk about naked, and men will not see his shame. And they gathered them together to the place which in Hebrew is called Har Magedon. Okay, so a lot of people believe Armageddon is in Israel. It's possible it could be in America, and it's possible it could come out of Minnesota, okay, Minneapolis. I mean, because it's a mystery, a prophetic mystery that we won't see until it really happens. But it's been interesting that we've seen this rioting rise up out of Minneapolis. And so we see 3 unclean spirits like frogs. Now, I listed Bill, Obama, and Biden. I actually, when I read this verse, actually believed that, like, the false prophet would be Trump, because I definitely think, too, he's one of, like, we're getting bad information on the right and bad information on the left that's causing people to, do bad behavior that's leading America into this civil war that's coming. But it was just interesting that we had this time frame where these 3 guys spoke out. Anyways, and then it's interesting too that we see the 6th angel poured out his bowl, because the 6 connects to, Trump being the 6th king. Okay, and the water was dried up. So that could be actually a picture of, so Biden is the sea, okay, or the rivers, okay, and his water got dried up, and Trump came into power, okay, and a lot of what Trump is doing goes against everything that the left had set up during the time of Biden, okay. And then it says the way would be prepared for the kings from the east, okay. So the east, remember, Trump's from the east because he's on the right, okay. The kings from the east would be like the 10 horns that get temporary authority for an hour for, to bring judgment, okay. So I definitely see shadows of the American Civil War in these verses. And then Jesus talking about keep your clothes. You want to be clothed with Messiah, which means you're going to have faith that God's got it taken care of, and you don't need to go out in the freezing cold temperatures to protest, okay? Or definitely don't need to go try to police the ICE people. I mean, that's just ridiculous, okay? I mean, evil is going to happen. I know, like, in the past, people thought that the reason why evil things happened is because nobody spoke up. There is actually a verse in the Bible that says, God's people keep quiet because they know the day is evil. So I do not believe that God is calling us to speak up right now. I don't think we'll be able to change anything, okay? I think we just wait patiently and be clothed in Messiah and our faith that Jesus is going to come and fix everything. So now we're on to the bunny thing, okay? So it's interesting that this boy's wearing a bunny hat, because I believe the bunny, so I believe all the, God has different prophetical shadows in the animals and stuff. And I think the bunny, what's interesting to me is that the bunny shows up at Easter time, okay? And at Easter time, we saw Jesus. Okay, so Jesus died on the cross with 2 criminals, one on the left and one on the right, okay? So we have these bunnies that kind of represent Easter, okay? And what's interesting is that, they talk about when you buy like a chocolate Easter bunny to like eat the ears first, okay, off the bunny. And so to me that's a picture of, how God's going to get rid of his enemies on the right and on the left, and then who's going to remain is Jesus and his followers in the middle, okay. So we eat the ears first. Okay. And so we have this boy wearing a blue rabbit hat. So I think the rabbit hat, the bunny represents the Civil War. Okay. With the right and the left. Okay. Um, and so then it was interesting that we saw Bad Bunny doing a Super Bowl halftime show on February 8th, which, if you add up those numbers, which I didn't talk about this back here, but Renee being 37 and Alex being 37, 3 plus 7 add up to 10. Okay. And so what I believe is that the protesters and the people that fight in the Civil War are the 10 that don't have faith. Okay. They send 12 spies to spy out the land. 2 of them come back with faith and say the land is good, but 10 of them come back and say the land is bad. Okay, so that's the number 10, and that's, where the 10 horns come from, the 10 without faith. Um, and so then we saw with the halftime show at the Super Bowl, it adds up to February 8th, adds up to 10-10. Okay, because 2026 is 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then February 8th is 8 plus 2 is 10. Okay, so that number 10 is showing up. And then what was interesting about Bad Bunny is he was at the 68th Grammys saying "Ice Out." Okay, so we were seeing political stuff at the Grammys. Okay, and I thought it was interesting that they were the 68th Grammys because that connects to Trump being the 6th king and the 8th king. Okay. And then I even think the whole Super Bowl thing was a picture of this coming Civil War because we had the Seahawks versus the Patriots. And my husband said that it's the two extremes from one end of the country to the other. The Seahawks are, from the West, from Seattle. The Patriots, are from the East. And so it was definitely a picture of West versus East. And anyways, and then what was interesting too was on February 17th. Okay, I didn't really look into this, but there was supposedly an asteroid called White Rabbit. Okay, so we're seeing that rabbit thing kind of show up. So then on January 26th, Time Magazine. So it was interesting that it was on 26 because I think that number connects to Trump, where he's like the 6th king that becomes the 8th king, and so 26 adds up to 8. Like first you see 6, but then it adds up to 8. Okay. I thought it was interesting that Time Magazine showed a picture of Trump playing chess because I really don't think he's that smart that he's playing chess. But not everyone, but a bunch of people believe that he's so smart and he's in foreign policy and he's planning out the world and and so everyone's sitting on pins and needles trying to figure out what his next move is. And so I think if anything he's playing more like checkers. He's really just living by his flesh. Okay. Okay. And then so just some really quick things to note. On January 28th was when the Moat book was launched, which is a social media network for the AI bots. Okay. So this is where I think things like this show us that days have to be short because there's just so much evil going on, and they kind of release these AI bots and things without a lot of boundaries. And so I really think that demons are kind of jumping into the AI bots and kind of taking over because they started this social media network and humans weren't allowed. They could watch, but they weren't allowed to participate. And I think they said the AI bots even started their own religion, and then we're talking about how to get rid of humans. So there's definitely an evil component to the AI bots. Then on January 31st to February 3rd was the second. Okay, that was a partial government shutdown. Okay. that was the second one in Trump's second term. Okay, and then since we're talking about shutdowns, I put the February 14th partial government shutdown, which I believe is still going on right now. Like I think they introduced another bill that got rejected or something recently, a couple days ago. And so that's the third one during Trump's second term. Okay. And like one of the things we're seeing is DHS is not funded in this partial government shutdown. And so I kind of think that we have like kind of like the Passover lambs, the sacrificial lambs would be like what do you call those people at the airport? The security, at the airport. What is their name? Sorry, I can't think of their name right now. But they're working without getting paid, okay? And so we definitely have some sacrificial lambs in our government that are working for no pay. Which is just, they end up being the victims of this crazy. We already sort of see the Civil War, in Congress between left and right, okay? And so then there's been, some innocent people being affected by that, okay? Okay, so then, so we're finally moving into February 1st. Praise the Lord. Okay, so on February 1st was when Nancy Guthrie, who's an 84-year-old, was kidnapped. Okay, so that's been part of the news. I probably don't have to say a whole lot because you definitely know plenty about it. Okay. Nancy might not even be alive anymore. Because it's been pretty much like 4 weeks of February. So it's been a really long time, and so she could be a part of the cloud of witnesses in heaven, and then Jesus will bring her back when he comes. So, but it's quite a trial for her remaining family. So I was thinking that the reason why this was such a big story, besides the fact that everyone could kind of like connect to the story, because we think about, well, what would I do if that was my mother? It's just such a sad story. So what I think is that this is a prophetic picture from God about the fact that we're going to be seeing Jesus return. Okay, because what we saw is so back when Jesus was born and he was 8 days old, they presented him in the temple, which the 8 days is interesting because, Trump is like the 8th king. Okay. So we're going to see Jesus return during the 8th king. Okay. And so in Luke 2, it says, and there was a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years and had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then as a widow to the age of 84. She never left the temple, serving night and day with fastings and prayers. At that very moment, she came up and began giving thanks to God and continued to speak of him to all who were looking for the redemption of Jerusalem. Okay, so this was an 84-year-old widow in the temple. Okay, so I think Nancy Guthrie is a prophetic picture of this prophetess in the temple. Okay, so what that means is I think Jesus is returning soon. And because I guess Nancy Guthrie was a churchgoer, and I guess she did Bible studies too or something. I saw something really quick earlier today or something about that. So she could definitely be part of the cloud of witnesses in heaven. And then what was interesting too was we saw on February 17th I need to get my February calendar. Okay. so we saw that Jesse Jackson died at 84. When they were talking about Jesse Jackson, they talked about how he ran for president in 1984 and 1988. And so what was interesting is that 1984, the 1984 election was when Reagan was voted into the second term. Okay. And I talked about last year. Yeah, I think this was last year when Trump had his inauguration last year during for his second term. A lot of the parallels between Reagan's second inauguration and Trump's second inauguration. Okay, because the weather was so cold both inaugurations that they had to do it indoors. Um, and so I think that that's partly what this 84 number is kind of pointing back to. Like there's been different things to kind of like bring us back to Reagan. Okay. Because it's like, well, how do you know you start counting the kings at Reagan? And I don't really remember my mindset when I first started, but it's worked very well. And so I'm pretty confident. I mean, it's been like 40 years since Reagan. Okay. And Reagan was the 40th president. So I'm pretty confident that we start counting with Reagan. Okay. And then what's interesting is if you take the names Jesse Jackson and Nancy Guthrie, they both have 5 letters in the first name and 7 letters in the second name, which add up to 12. Okay. What's interesting about 84 is that adds up to 12. Okay. And so what I think is that, well, what I really think is that Jesus is going to return and be like the 48th president. I mean, really, he's gonna come back and be king. But I think that number 48 connects to him. Because he's gonna follow Trump. Not follow Trump, but he's gonna come in power after Trump. Okay. And so 84 is like 48 backwards. Okay. And we saw that Israel became a nation in 1948. And then what's interesting is that that 1335, like, Daniel 12 says we will be blessed if we make it to the 1335 days. It actually adds up to 48. 13 adds up to 4, and 35 adds up to 8. Okay, so I thought that was interesting. So that's what I'm wondering about those possible signs. And then what was interesting too was we saw the quad god. Okay, so I won't say much about the Olympics. Obviously the Olympic. Okay, well, so, I told you there was a lot of stuff kind of pointing to Reagan. The Olympic opening ceremony was 2/6, 26, which was Reagan's birthday. Okay. I mean, kind of interesting, 2/6, 26. So that was interesting. And of course we know that, there's like pagan stuff in the opening ceremony, pagan stuff in the closing ceremony. What was interesting about so they called this guy the quad god. Okay, that's a lot of pressure to put on this little kid here. Because he could do quads. Okay. Oh, see, I didn't even think about this because it says quad god finishes 8th. And so then you have those numbers 8 and 4 there. Okay, so that's definitely interesting. And so they all thought he was going to win gold, and he ended up falling. In biggest shock of games is what they said. And so that happened on February 13th, which was the 7th day of Olympics, the 8 days after the opening ceremony. So you have those numbers 7 and 8 there. It was the 8th week after Trump put his name on the Kennedy Center. What's interesting is if you take his name, Ilya Malinin, it's 4 letters in the first name, 7 letters in the second name, which is 47, which connects to Trump being the 47th president. So I think this was kind of a picture of that Trump's fall is going to occur really soon. And especially because they thought this guy was going to win gold. Okay. And then, so I put these verses in here. Proverbs 16:18, highlighted 18. Okay, 666. It says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Okay, so now I don't really know if this Ilya guy, he actually seemed kind of humble when I saw him on TV. This verse is really more for Trump. Okay. And then on February 13, too, was the last day of funding for DHS, and so the third government shutdown began on February 14th. Okay. So that's that. Okay. So then I want to back up to last year. Okay, so I've talked about this, how I believe that Trump is Ishmael. Okay, and at some point, God made a promise. Well, God made a promise to Abraham that he was going to give him a son, Isaac, who was going to come out of his body, who was going to be, you know, I mean, what I really believe is that Isaac is a picture of there's going to be a Jewish Messiah, not a Messiah like Trump who comes from the concubine. Okay. So Ishmael came from the concubine. Okay. And so, I mean, I think that Trump might be from the tribe of Dan. But he's definitely not Jewish. And anyway, so I was looking at my calendar in February and I said, if I was God, this was last year, or, well, I did this year, but I was wondering about last year. I said, if I was God, when would I send this message about Isaac coming? Okay, because it was supposed to happen like a year later, around the same time frame. Okay, and so I really kind of got stuck on President's Day, and I said, I bet God did it on President's Day. And so last year, on February 17th, was President's Day. Okay. And so last year it was President's Day. They had no King's protests last year. Okay. What was fascinating about last year is we had this plane crash, Delta Flight 4819. It left the Minneapolis airport. It crash landed in Toronto at 2:45. All 80 people survived. It lost its right wing and tail and flipped over. And then, so we saw fire and snow with this plane crash. Okay. So if you look at the flight number 4819, I already talked about how 48 connects to Jesus. And 19 probably connects to Jesus too. Because it like follows 18. So Jesus comes after the Antichrist, after 666. And then it's interesting, like I said, Minneapolis, because that connects to the protest this year. 245, so 45, well, so what's interesting is 45 connects to Trump's first term, and then you add 45 to the 2 and you get 47, which connects to his second term, which, by the way, is 9/11. So 45 and 47 is 9/11. Okay. And so with 80 people surviving by the grace of God, the number 8 connects to Trump being the 8th king. Okay. And then we have the plane lost its right wing, which connects to Trump being on the right. Okay. And then the flip over, like with these plane crashes, like I've always said that what comes up must come down. Like Jesus talks about in the last days, the first will be last and the last will be first. And, so God is going to completely flip things over. And the last will be first and the first will be last. And then we see that fire and snow. I mean, with the protest, there was fire and snow because, like, the snow would be ice. Okay. And then the fire, from the protest. Okay. Because remember, I don't know if I talked about this in my last video, but the fiery hail that came, in the book of Exodus, that was one of the plagues on Egypt. I think that connects to the I believe that's a prophetic shadow of ice and the protests. Okay. Fiery hail. Okay, so fire and ice. Okay. Um so um you know, and so I talked about, so God told Abraham like a year from now around this time frame, you will see, your son will be born. So Isaac will be born. And so so that story comes from Genesis 17. Okay, so I thought that happened on 2/17 last year, which was President's Day. Okay. Because Genesis 17 says, and Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." But God said, "No, but Sarah your wife will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant. But as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I will bless him and will make him fruitful and multiply him exceedingly. He shall become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation." That number 12 connects to 6 6. Okay. "But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this season next year." Okay. Um, so that's why I was wondering like when it happened, because we didn't see the Messiah return around the 1 year time frame of Trump's um, inauguration. But one of the things that I noticed is that, okay, so I wrote, Trump is Ishmael. He's a wild donkey. His hand is against everyone. That definitely describes Trump. Okay, Ishmael was circumcised at 13. So I'm wondering if we're going to see 13 months of Trump, which we're in. I think we're in the 13th month now of Trump. It might have started on February 20th. I'm not sure. So, yeah, that actually kind of makes sense. So, anyways, so then let's talk about February 17 this year. Okay. There was a ring of fire solar eclipse on February 17th. Like I said, that was when the asteroid White Rabbit showed up. It was 1 year after this Delta plane crash. And then it was 1335 days after Roe v. Wade was overturned. It was 42 days after January 7th. I was really expecting something to happen on February 17th, like seeing Jesus's return or something, or maybe February 18th. I think I was looking 17 and 18 because the 17th was Mardi Gras and then the 18th was Ash Wednesday. Because, we read about the Gentiles trotting the city for 42 months. Okay, so that's why I thought that 42 day time frame would be really significant. What's interesting about February 17th this year is that, but it didn't quite work out that way. What was interesting about February 17th this year is that it's the last day on the Hebrew calendar before the month of Adar. The Jewish people talk about in Adar we increase in joy. Okay, the month of Adar. And that's because it connects to the book of Esther. Okay. I mean, they increase in joy because Haman gets killed. Okay. And other things happen too. So February 17th was Mardi Gras. It was the start of Ramadan and Lunar New Year. So it's kind of interesting when things kind of intersect that way. So on February 17th was when we saw Oklahoma and Kansas fires. Okay. California had an avalanche where 9 died. Colorado had a dust storm where 4 died. The dust blew onto Highway 25. And so I saw a connection to Haggai 2:17, because let's see if I could find that really quick. I always have trouble. It's a small book, and so I have trouble finding it. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Let me look it up on the computer. Because it just, when you read it, it just goes so well with what happened on February 17th. Okay. Um, so this is for all you people that don't think those numbers are um, inspired by God. I mean, I see stuff like this all the time. Okay, so on Haggai 2:17 says, I smote you in every work of your hands with blasting wind, mildew, and hail, yet you did not come back to me, declares the Lord. Okay, so definitely very interesting. The Renee Good Memorial was actually set on fire in Minneapolis, obviously by someone probably on the far right. An 18-year-old rushed the Capitol with the loaded shotgun. I don't know, I didn't follow that up to kind of understand that guy's motivation. I think he got killed, so I don't know what happened with that. Like I said, Jesse Jackson died, and February 17th was one of the meetings with Iran. It was also the start of a 2-day meeting with Ukraine and Russia, which, there's still war in Ukraine and Russia, and obviously there's war with Iran now. So, and then this says Tuesday's rare ring of fire eclipse sets up Lunar New Year Ramadan. A rare ring of fire annular solar eclipse will sweep across remote parts of Antarctica on Tuesday, February 17th, as the center of the sun is briefly blocked by the same new moon that ushers in 2 major cultural events. They kind of left out Mardi Gras, but whatever. Though few, if any, people will witness the rare moment when up to 90, I think that says 96% of the sun is blocked by the moon to create an annulus ring. Its timing is significant, setting the stage for the Lunar New Year, blah, 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 if you believe that. But it's also setting the stage for Lent and Ash Wednesday, which was the next day. Okay. And so I like this picture. I mean, this obviously, this did not come from this year's Ring of Fire. But what I like about this picture is it kind of shows like the left and the right, okay, of these solar eclipses, okay? And so God's definitely painting us a picture of the left, like it's Jesus on the cross again, Jesus in the middle with the criminals on the left and the right. So, okay, and then February 19th, we saw the large banner of Trump unfurled at the Justice Department. And NBC News wrote that the DOJ has traditionally operated with a degree of separation from the White House to prevent its powers from being abused for political purposes. Obviously, those border boundaries are being blurred in this time of Trump. So the banner said, "Make America Safe Again," talked about it being part of the Robert F. Kennedy building. What I think's interesting about that is that Trump probably got in trouble for putting his name on the Kennedy Center. And so instead he just got a banner put on this building. They actually said there was a couple other buildings in DC that had banners too. And so you see Trump's face. I mean, he just loves to have his name and his face everywhere. Okay. Also on February 19th, Trump picked commission. Okay, so the Trump picked commission approves White House ballroom design plans. Okay, this is how you get something done. I don't know how he does this, but he just starts this whole new commission with his people, and then when they vote on things, they vote for Trump's White House design plans. Okay. And then that was the same day as the Board of Peace meeting, which we talked about earlier. Oh, which I didn't say this last time when I was talking about the Board of Peace. What's interesting about who's on this Board of Peace and who's not on this Board of Peace is we're missing a lot of, like, the countries in Europe chose not to be on this Board of Peace. So a lot of, like, American allies are actually not on the Board of Peace. Okay. So, I think that says a lot about who Trump is. I mean, who Trump makes friends with. It's not the good guys, really. So, okay, and then on February 21st was, okay, so that whole week, February 15th to the 21st, was these, massive snowstorms in California. And so they said, like, so the resorts, okay, so the ones, okay, so the highest snow total was in Palisades, Tahoe, at 124 inches. Okay, according to Instagram story post. China Peak at 82 to 118 inches. Sugar Bowl at 111 inches. So just these really huge, massive amounts of snow. That's why, you get an avalanche. Okay, so that was interesting. Then on 22nd, was when, okay, so they killed that Mexican cartel leader. I don't know. Oh, yeah, here's his name. Okay, so he was the leader of the drug cartel in Mexico, El Mencho. Oh, I forgot I was going to look up what that meant. So they killed him, and then what happened was this rioting in Mexico. Fortunately, not a lot of civilians were killed, so that was good. But they burnt up a lot of trucks and buses and convenience stores, the cars in the parking lot of Costco. So it was just crazy. And it kind of reminds me of how, okay, and so this was influenced by Trump. Okay, so he's like the son of destruction. Okay. And it reminds me where Jesus says, if you kill the leader, then the sheep will scatter. And so, it's all well and good that you want to get rid of these evil leaders, but it just causes chaos. Okay. And so this thing that happened in Mexico actually might have been a warning about, like, don't go after the evil leadership in Iran. But of course, Trump didn't take that warning. Then we saw on 22nd to the 23rd of February, they had a bomb cyclone nor'easter. This is crazy, the snow that they got there, too. It was pumping out snow at more than 2 or 3 inches per hour. Rhode Island locations reported more than 36 inches. That's 3 feet of snow, like in a 2-day time frame. Snow totals as of 10 a.m. 2/24, there was 30.8 inches in North Stonington, Connecticut, 21 inches in Long Neck, Delaware. And actually, a lot of times these places don't really get that much snow in the wintertime. So just very unusual. It was 33.7 inches in Whitman, Massachusetts, 37.9 inches in, way over 3 feet in TF Green, AP, Rhode Island. So crazy. Then on February 24th, Trump did his State of the Union. What was interesting is that he had the gold hockey team, the men's team there, which I think there was something like they didn't even really have room for them. So I don't really quite know how they accomplished that. I just sort of slightly heard the story. Anyways, and Trump talked for 60 plus 47 minutes and 40 seconds long. Like, it was an hour and 47 minutes and 40 seconds. Like, is the official time on some official like Washington website, like government website or whatever, which is interesting because some people were saying it was like 60 an hour 47 minutes, and some people were saying an hour 48. So I thought that was interesting because you know how 47 connects to Trump and 48 connects to Jesus. So I highlighted 60, okay, because that connects to the golden statue of Nebuchadnezzar, which was 60 by 6, okay. February 24th was actually 9 months and 11 days from May 14th, okay, which is Israel, when Israel was established as a nation. It was the anniversary of the 4th year of the start of the Ukraine war. And then it was 62 weeks and 6 days from 12/12/24, which was when Trump was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. So, I don't think I'll read these quotes. I mean, because it's Trump boasting, basically. And you've seen nothing yet. We're going to do better and better. This is the golden age of America. So I did a search, and it seemed like he mentioned the golden age of America twice in his speech. So these are the two quotes that are separated by a bunch of stuff in between. And so it reminds me of the two golden calves of Jeroboam that he set up. We also have the story of the golden statue of Nebuchadnezzar, which I said, okay, so the golden statue was 60 by 6. Okay, that's why I thought that 60 number for the speech was interesting. And then it was also when you heard 6 instruments, you were supposed to fall before Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue. So that's where you get 666 in that story. What's interesting about that story is that Nebuchadnezzar's golden statue is followed by the fiery furnace. Okay, so it's interesting that after Trump's State of the Union, where he mentions golden age twice, then at the end of that week was the start of the attack on Iran. Okay, so I definitely think I think it helps me understand a little bit more about the fiery furnace. On the 25th, February 25th, was when they had the Cuban border shooting. That could be like Cuban nationals or like Cuban Americans wanting to, like, maybe they were jealous that they got rid of the leader in Venezuela, and so maybe they were trying to get some attention on Cuba to see if they can get Trump to get rid of the leader in Cuba. The problem is that Trump has all his military assets in the Middle East, so it didn't really work. And then on the 28th, okay, so then we're up to the 28th, which was yesterday. We saw 6 planets. Okay, they said that 6 planets aligned yesterday, which I definitely think is really interesting. I didn't really get a chance to look at it. It would have been cool to have a picture of that. And then that was the attack on Iran, okay, by Israel and America. And what was interesting is that it happened on Shabbat Sukkot, and so we'll get into that. But I found some verses about the war, okay. In Daniel 11, we read about this king that will pitch the tents of his royal pavilion between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. So that reminds me of Trump moving all his military assets into the Middle East. Daniel 12, and I highlighted 12 because we're in the 12th month on the Hebrew calendar. And so this war was actually 12/11 on the Hebrew calendar, the start of this war. And it says, at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who's found written in the book, will be rescued. So Michael, sometimes I think Michael talks about Netanyahu, and sometimes I think it talks about Trump. And then sometimes I think it talks about the Messiah. So we definitely saw Trump arising in this attack against Iran. We saw Israel arising. So just like probably a triple fulfillment of this verse. Like we'll see the third fulfillment when Jesus comes. Daniel 9:26, I highlighted 26 because that connects to the year 2026. And then it says after the 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. So let's see. I don't know if I'll be able to find it. Oh yeah, right here. So remember the State of the Union was on the 62nd week. So after the 62 weeks, the anointed will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. I mean, we already saw fulfillment with this verse. With there's a 62 weeks connected to Biden, okay, and then Trump, who was the prince who is to come, came and just destroys the city, destroys what Biden had built. And then it says the prince will destroy the sanctuary, so we see Trump, because of him and Netanyahu attacking Iran. We're seeing, now there's destruction in Israel. I mean, hopefully by the grace of God, it won't be that bad. But there have been some people killed, which is really sad. And its end will come with a flood. And then it says, even to the end, there will be war. Okay, so we're in another war, which means that we could see Jesus return really soon. Okay. And in Matthew 26, so it was interesting because it was Matthew 26:2. Okay. So it actually, if you take 26 and you add 2 to it, you get 28. And so that connects to there was a meeting with Iran on the 26th. And then on the 28th was when Iran got attacked. Okay. And so I thought it was interesting that this verse says, you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion. Okay, and they plotted together to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. So they actually plotted to stealthily attack Iran, and I guess Iran was surprised, which I'm not really sure why. Like, I mean, I mean, did they really fall for? Because Trump at some point said, I'm going to give Iran like 2 weeks, and then whatever. But I think he did that last time too when they attacked. And Trump gave a time frame and then they attacked earlier. So I don't know why they would fall for that again. And then the verse goes on to say, but they were saying not during the festival, otherwise a riot might occur among the people. So I'm wondering if that's saying, so it's interesting that Iran got attacked not on Purim, okay, but I'm wondering if this verse is a prophetical shadow telling us that rioting might happen during Purim, okay, which could mean that the Civil War could be starting on Purim, okay, the Civil War in America. And then, okay, so also about the war, I mean, there's so much in the Bible I could show you, but we read in Daniel about, is it Nebuchadnezzar? He makes the furnace 7 times hotter. Okay, so that's a picture of, okay, so Trump and Netanyahu basically, they have made things worse for Israel. Okay, because okay, they kind of had this sleepy war with Gaza. Okay, but now with Iran, I mean, things are, just ramped up again. And so Iran's just been bombing like sort of left and right in the Middle East. Okay, like they actually said that Iran has bombed more Middle East countries than Israel has. Okay, because they're going after like the American troops that have bases in these Middle East countries. Anyway, so Trump and Netanyahu have made things 7 times hotter. We read, there's a story in Genesis about the 2 sons of Jacob make Jacob odious, because they go in. That is definitely a story about this war. They go in on the 3rd day and kill everybody in the city. Okay, and so we saw that, like, if you count the 26th as the first day when they had the meeting, the 27th is the 2nd day, the 28th is the 3rd day. So definitely on the 3rd day, they went into Iran and started bombing in Iran. And so the 2 sons of Jacob went in and killed everybody on the 3rd day. And it made Jacob more odious, okay? And so Jacob was afraid that people were going to come after him and kill him, okay? And so that's what we see is that, we thought people hated Israel before because of Gaza. Well, now they're going to hate Israel even more because of Iran. Okay. So that's the story. The other thing, too, that I want to point out is that Trump and Netanyahu are the legs of iron in Daniel's statue. Okay. And so, when we read about the two witnesses bringing fire from heaven, it's the rockets that they're sending down on Iran. Okay, so that's a fulfillment of the two witnesses. Okay. And then Matthew 28:2, and I highlighted that because 28:2 is 2:28, which is February 28th. And it says, and behold, a severe earthquake had occurred. So that's the war in Iran. And then it says, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled away the stone and sat upon it. And his appearance was like lightning, and his clothing as white as snow. So these verses could go, like the angel descending from heaven could be a picture of Jesus returning after this earthquake in Iran. Matthew 24 said, but pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath. So February 28th was a winter Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation. That's definitely the time frame we're in. Such has not occurred since the beginning of the world, nor ever will. And then I highlighted, because hopefully this is when we'll finally see the fulfillment of this, because I haven't seen anything cut short yet. But verse 22 says, unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days would be cut short. It's interesting that it's verse 22, because that could connect to the eighth king. Unless God cuts the time of Trump short, no life would have been saved. And then I left this part in because I think it's very appropriate. Then if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him. So just because Trump and Netanyahu were able to get rid of Khomeini, don't think there's some great, messiahs or whatever. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and show great signs and wonders so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. So don't be misled by the fact that they were able to accomplish this. And then so Shabbat Zakor. So the Jewish people have certain special Shabbats, Sabbaths on Saturday. And so it was very interesting that February 28th was Shabbat Zakor, because they actually read about Amalek on Shabbat Zakor. And and so the verses they read are Deuteronomy 25:17 and 19, and 1 Samuel 15:2-34. And so they were supposed to remember what Amalek did to you along the way when you came out from Egypt, how he met you along the way and attacked among you all the stragglers at your rear when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. Okay, so I definitely think Khomeini is a picture of this, or is a prophetic fulfillment of Amalek, because they attacked, because of October 7th. Okay. And then what Israel is supposed to do when God gives them rest from all your surrounding enemies, you're supposed to blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Okay. And then, so definitely, Khomeini being killed on Shabbat Zakor is very highly prophetical. Okay. And then Samuel said to Saul, thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way while he was coming up from Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. Saul came to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in the valley. So Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as you go to Shur, which is east of Egypt. So Khomeini got killed on the 28th, and they actually said, I think that was the first strike. And so I think somehow, So a while ago, yeah, so when they had the 12-day war, like Trump actually knew where Khomeini was, but he didn't give that information to Israel, was the what I had read. Um, but apparently this time he was on board to let's get rid of Khomeini. Okay. I mean, he's kind of on this kick of let's get rid of all these leaders that I don't like. Um, and uh and so apparently there was some intelligence of like Khomeini actually was, I guess, meeting with a bunch of other leaders. And so they were able to bomb them and like I heard the number 40, like if 40 leaders were killed. But of course there's always people waiting in the wings to fill in. Um, so anyways, but it always happens if you go after like especially Iran, if you go attack Iran, they're going to turn around and attack Israel. So that's why I think God has to shorten the days because, like now Iran's going after Israel. I put this picture in from Back to the Future because it kind of shows, when Biff was in power, all the chaos that he caused. Um, and I mean, I put this in when I was talking about BLM because I thought it was so appropriate, but it just kind of connects now to what's going on. That Trump, when he's in power, just creates all this chaos. Um, and Daniel 7 says, he will speak out against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One, and he will intend to make alterations in times and in law, and they will be given into his hands for a time, and half a time. Okay, so times, and half a time has to do with time of Obama, the time of Trump, the time of Biden, and then now with Trump's second term, like half a time connects to the dividing of time. Okay, where that I mean Trump is really bringing, he's gonna cause the civil war in America. Because it connects to Peleg, in Genesis, where in his days, the world was divided. Now we've heard about the Israeli. I've heard someone talk about the Israeli soldiers are already really worn out because of this nonstop war that's been going on, but the Israeli people too are also worn out of constantly having to go down into the bomb shelters. So they are really going to get worn down these next couple of days, which is why I'm thinking, God is. I mean, so then we can expect Jesus to come soon because the people in Israel are definitely worn out. I definitely think too the people in America are probably, God's people in America are definitely worn down too. And then Exodus 9:11. So I put in this little box metaphor because we have to remember that the things that happen in the Bible are like a metaphor. Oh, and then at the time when I put that in, I knew what the definition of metaphor, like a shadow, a symbol of, future prophetic events. Okay, so I talked about hail being connected to, it was the hail with, okay, so these are the plagues in Exodus. It's interesting that we find it in chapters 9 to 11 of the book of Exodus. And so I think the hail connects to ice with their shooting people, hail with fire. Okay. The locust, okay, the east wind brought the locust. Okay. So Trump caused these protesters and rioters to rise up. Okay. Trump being on the east. Okay, then there was 3 days of darkness. So I'm not totally sure, but does the 3 days of darkness, it says no one rose from his place for 3 days. Does that connect to the 3 shutdowns? It could connect to this current war, because, okay, it started on the 28th, and then maybe it's going to happen on the 28th, the March 1st, and the March 2nd, because then on March 3rd is Purim. Okay, because Esther talks about the Jews fasting for 3 days. Okay, so that could be the 3 days of darkness. Okay, with this war. Okay, Although I did think it was interesting that we've had 3 shutdowns. Okay. And then, so then in Exodus, then there was one more plague, and it said, the firstborn of Egypt shall die. Okay, well, so we're already seeing a fulfillment of that with the Iran attack, that some of the leaders in Egypt got killed. Okay, I have for the longest time I've always thought this last plague was talking about the Civil War in America, and so maybe a double fulfillment. So, and then I had thought that maybe Iran with the fiery furnace. Okay, so what I believe now is that America is the lion's den, because we have these protesters. Israel is the people in the fiery furnace because they have the wars. Okay. And I mean, besides just protesters for lion's den, it's also just like in Congress fighting against each other and stuff like that. And so I thought, and I knew about the fiery furnace, like the furnace getting 7 times hotter. And so I thought maybe like Iran would nuke Israel, but maybe that doesn't have to happen. Maybe just this current escalation is enough. And then Jesus comes and saves the Jewish people out of the fiery furnace. So the Jewish people read Jeremiah 9:11 on Tisha B'Av, which is a whole nother teaching, which is their kind of a 9/11. That's when the temples got destroyed and all that kind of stuff. And it says, I will make Jerusalem a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, and I will make the cities of Judah a desolation without inhabitant. I mean, it seems pretty destructive for the cities of Judah. That's why I was thinking maybe a nuclear attack was going to happen in Israel. And then, but I guess they're a desolation without inhabitant because, like, the people in Israel are all in the bomb shelters right now. So maybe that's the fulfillment of that. Maybe it doesn't have to be all that bad. And so I think Jerusalem is America, in a prophetic shadow of America. I'll make Jerusalem a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, so that's the lion's den, the Civil War, so that's that verse. And like I said, don't go either left or right. In Deuteronomy 5, God says, you shall observe to do just as the Lord your God has commanded. Don't turn aside to the right or left. Okay. In the Gospels, the disciples, there arose a dispute among them as to which one of them was regarded to be the greatest. Okay, so I think that's a picture of, how we have the left and the right saying we're the righteous ones, we're the good ones, but really you want to be in the middle with Jesus. You want to be on the dry land with Messiah. It talks about the great city being split into 3 parts. Okay, so there we go. It's a lot of information going on. Okay, and so like I said, what I think, okay, so the next high watch dates are March 2nd and March 3rd. March 2nd is Purim Eve. It's also the fast of Esther. And then Purim is March 3rd. What's fascinating about March 3rd is that it's 3/3. So it's definitely a 3rd day, just like on the calendar, 3rd day of March. But what's interesting is that Netanyahu, so who got into office on 12/1/2022, that would be the third month, 3rd day. Like there's a 333 connected to Netanyahu and December 1st, 2022. So that was interesting. I did a lot of calculations. There wasn't too much that was like a smoking gun. But there was Purim Eve is 2 months, 17 days from Hanukkah Eve. Okay, and the second month is 17-day connects to the Great Flood. Okay, in like Genesis 7:11. It's 62 weeks from 12/12/24. Okay, so that could be the 62 weeks. Um let's see. Um it's 9 months, 11 days from May 20th, 2025. That's when Trump announced his Golden Dome. Anyways, I don't know if there was anything. Oh, it is 40 days from January 22nd, Trump's Board of Peace. So we talked about that. Oh, here's that thing. It's 3 years, 3 months, 3 days of Netanyahu is on March 3rd. Okay, but March 2nd is 40 days from the Board of Peace, January 22nd. So anyways, I mean, basically I would, might put these in a chart if something happens on these days besides just the holiday. It would be helpful to have these in a chart so you could see them. What's interesting is, so Steve Fletcher, like, first was doing a video about how the blood moon happens on Purim, March 3rd. Okay. And he was like, people were saying, hey, it's the third blood moon or whatever, third lunar eclipse. But then Steve Fletcher said, no, it's wrong. But actually, if you write it all down, it works, because in 2024, the lunar eclipse was actually on Shushan Purim, which is the second day of Purim. In 2025, the lunar eclipse blood moon was actually on Purim Eve. And then this year, so it's interesting because you're seeing that picture again with Jesus in the middle. So the lunar eclipse is actually on March 3rd. So definitely interesting, like Purim. So like it was either on Purim Eve or the day after Purim, and then this year the lunar eclipse is in Purim. Okay, so I think that's the picture that God's trying to paint with the lunar eclipse. Okay, so definitely a blood moon. So that's why March 3rd is such a high watch date. So the blood worm moon, so it's 6:04 Eastern time to 7:03 totality. And then so it starts at 3:44 a.m. in the Eastern time zone and goes to 9:23. But the best view, because basically what happens is the sun rises in the east, but the best view of this lunar eclipse would be in the on the west coast. So that's interesting. So on March 3rd. Okay, so high watch date. Okay, so set your clocks. Jesus could be right at the door. So thanks for listening. I know it's a lot of information. But hopefully you can see that prophecies are being fulfilled and that Jesus is at the door waiting to return. So God bless. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.